What is the true story of the Templars? Welcome to Clairvaux, where history comes alive and where every video immerses you in the fate of those who have shaped the world. Today, get ready to step beyond the veil of time and walk in the footsteps of an order both feared, admired, and shrouded in mystery. At the heart of the Crusades, between burning sand and stone cathedrals, emerges the name of a brotherhood that became legend, the Templars. There, it is all about what is the true story of the Templars. Welcome to Clairvaux, where history comes alive and where every video immerses you in the fate of those who have shaped the world. Today, get ready to step beyond the veil of time and walk in the footsteps of an order both feared, admired, and shrouded in mystery. At the heart of the Crusades, between burning sand and stone cathedrals, emerges the name of a brotherhood that became legend, the Templars. There, it is all about oath, silence, and devotion. Warrior monks, they bear the cross on their chest and steel in hand. Their mission, to protect pilgrims, defend the faith, and build an empire in the service of Christ. From the turmoil of battlefields to the hushed corridors of chanceries, from the coffers of the powerful to the corners of the occult, the Order of the Temple weaves a web of influence that spans centuries. Then, suddenly, the fall, arrests, trials, torture, and a final pyre on the Ile de la Cité. Between fervor and ambition, sacrifice and conspiracy, the Templars leave behind a legacy as brilliant as it is unsettling. Since the Middle Ages, their name resonates like a secret whispered in the shadow of thrones. What does the myth of the Templars really hide? But before setting off on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Thank you, and have a good journey. We are at the turn of the year 1000, a pivotal moment where the West, the Near East, and other regions are experiencing deep political, religious, and socio-economic upheavals. In a world dominated by agriculture and military power, the emergence of new power structures, demographic growth, and the evolution of beliefs shape a civilization in transformation. This era, from the dawn of the 11th century until around 1120, will be explored chronologically with a close look at local and international dynamics. At the beginning of the 11th century, Western Europe is recovering from Viking invasions that have profoundly transformed its political and social organization. These raids from the north have led inhabitants to group together, giving rise to a feudal system based on the tenure of lands entrusted by a lord to his vassals in exchange for military service and loyalty. This system consolidates with the rise of local lordships, the construction of strong castles, and the gradual establishment of a pyramidal hierarchy. The Gregorian reforms launched by Pope Gregory VII, who held office from 1073 to 1085, seek to affirm the independence of the Church from secular powers, notably by imposing clerical celibacy and reinforcing papal authority in the appointment of bishops, an issue known as investiture. These changes occur in a context of growing piety, where the construction of churches and abbeys testifies to spiritual vitality. Monasteries, like Cluny in Burgundy, founded in 910, become important cultural hubs and foster the dissemination of knowledge. Demographically, the West is experiencing a notable rise in its population, supported by improved agricultural yields, thanks to new techniques and relatively mild climate. The gradual adoption of the heavy plow and the three-field crop rotation system provides better yields, allowing more individuals to sustain themselves. This human expansion is accompanied by the creation of villages and the cultivation of lands that were once wooded or marshy. Between 1000 and 1120, the face of Latin West transforms, preparing the emergence of the great monarchies of the following centuries. In the Near East, around the year 1000, the Fatimid Caliphate of Shiite allegiance rules from Cairo, extending its influence over North Africa and part of the Levant. It rivals with the Abbasid Caliphate of Baghdad, weakened by political divisions and increasing instability. In Mesopotamia, Baghdad loses its power due to internal struggles, allowing local emirs to take control. The Seljuks, a Turkish dynasty, seize Baghdad in the mid-11th century, nominally protecting the Abbasid Caliph while exercising real power. Their empire quickly extends into Anatolia, Iran, and the Levant, bringing new administrative and military structures. The Near East remains a major crossroads of commercial, intellectual, and cultural exchanges, blending Arab, Persian, and Turkish heritages. New centers of knowledge, notably the madrasas, emerge, spreading both religious and secular education. Despite political rivalries, travel fosters the circulation of knowledge in astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. At the dawn of the 12th century, this transforming region mingles religious and political universes, preparing future conflicts and significant cultural exchanges. The Mediterranean, a cradle of civilization since antiquity, becomes again in the 11th century a space of intense contacts, linking the Latin West, the Byzantine Empire, and the Muslim world. The maritime routes between India, Alexandria, and Constantinople form a favored circuit for spices, silk, precious stones, and other exotic products. These goods then pass into the hands of Italian merchants from Venice, Genoa, and Pisa, who distribute them in Western Europe. The commercial flows gradually enrich the port cities, whose influence endures throughout the Middle Ages. Despite this prosperity, the Mediterranean is also a battleground of rivalries. The Byzantine Empire must defend its Anatolian provinces against Seljuk expansion. After the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, the Seljuk Turks take control of much of Anatolia. The emperors of Constantinople attempt through treaties and alliances to protect access to the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, essential for commerce. Venice gains significant commercial privileges in exchange for its naval assistance, reinforcing its maritime role. This global crossroads also serves as a cultural bridge. Greek, Latin, and Arab knowledge circulates, stimulating intellectual emulation in medicine, philosophy, and sciences. Schools and study centers in merchant cities allow scholars to confront their knowledge. Between 1000 and 1120, the Mediterranean is a crucial commercial, military, and cultural theater for medieval political and economic balances. While Europe and the Near East evolve, other regions experience their own dynamics. In East Asia, the Song dynasty, from 960 to 1279, in China brings prosperity and technological innovations, such as gunpowder and banknotes for transactions. The Songs encourage flourishing maritime trade, linking China to Southeast Asia, the Indian world, and the Middle East. In this bureaucratic empire, imperial examinations select officials, while artisanal and artistic production reaches its peak, notably with the famous porcelains. Further south, the Chola Empire flourishes in South India from the 9th to 13th centuries, reaching its peak around the year 1000. Its power rests on mastering maritime routes and the formation of a thalassocracy extending to Java in present-day Indonesia. The Cholas develop a network of dynamic ports where spices, precious stones, and fabrics converge. Tamil culture, unifying for this empire, shines through religious architecture, notably the monumental temples dedicated to Shiva. On the American continent, several civilizations reach a golden age. The Toltecs dominate central Mexico between the 10th and 12th centuries, establishing their power in Tula, whose warrior statues testify to military and religious importance. Further north, the Mississippian culture develops along the Mississippi River with city-states and ritual mounds. Cahokia, near present-day St. Louis, becomes a major urban center, hosting a large population and ceremonial earthen structures. Despite the distances, the world of 1000 to 1120 is built according to diverse logics, shaping remarkable civilizations. Pilgrimage occupies a fundamental place in religious life between 1000 and 1120. The main destinations are Compostela, Rome, and Jerusalem. Compostela attracts believers coming to venerate the relics of the Apostle James. Rome is the center of Western Christianity. Jerusalem remains a sacred site linked to the Passion of Christ. These journeys stimulate the economy. Roads and inns develop around the sanctuaries, creating new trades. Pilgrimage involves risks, bandits, extorting lords, and proximity favoring diseases. Nevertheless, many persist to obtain indulgences and honor vows. Some hope for a miraculous cure. The Church encourages these journeys, seeing them as a means to strengthen faith. Pilgrimage becomes an initiatory rite, marked by devotion and sacrifices. Local communities benefit materially while participating in Christian solidarity. Each route becomes a spiritual adventure, nourishing the stories of the time. Traveling long distances to pray over relics illustrates the medieval conception of a world connected by faith. From the west to the east, pilgrimage weaves a network of sacred routes, reflecting the persistent fervor of thousands of men and women seeking redemption. In November 1095, Western Europe retains the memory of Viking invasions since the 9th century. Feudal structures take root, and the Church seeks to assert itself against secular power. In this context, Pope Urban II, born Odon de Lagerie, convenes a council in Clairvaux, France. On November 27th, before bishops, abbots, lords, and believers, he delivers a speech that changes history. According to the monk Fulcher of Chartres, Urban II calls on Western Christians to help their Eastern brethren. Byzantine Emperor Alexios III Komnenos in Constantinople has requested military assistance against the Seljuk Turks, who have threatened his territories since the defeat at Manzikert in 1071. Originating from the Central Asian steppes, these Turks have conquered vast regions in the Near East, including Jerusalem, alarming Christian pilgrims. The Pope presents this peril as imminent for Christianity. He urges Western lords and knights to turn their swords away from European conflicts to liberate the tomb of Christ from Muslim influence. He promises plenary indulgence to those who take up the cross, assuring the forgiveness of their sins. His message, which evokes Christian reconquest and spiritual glory, inspires great enthusiasm. This call particularly affects the knights amid a religious fervor linked to the Gregorian reform, which strengthens the Pope's role. Many warriors, driven by piety and attracted by adventure and material gains, respond favorably. Among them are the great barons Raymond of Saint-Gilles, Count of Toulouse, Godfrey of Bouillon, Duke of Lower Lorraine, and Bohemond of Taranto from the Norman family of southern Italy. In the spring of 1096, the first contingents set out. Crowds more or less well organized, sometimes lacking real military command, leave from France, the German Empire, or Italy. Successive waves occur, including the People's Crusade, led by Peter the Hermit, a charismatic preacher who gathers many villagers and peasants. This troop lacks discipline. Some pilgrims commit atrocities on the way, and many perish before even reaching Constantinople. More structured contingents of nobles leave armed and supported, led notably by Hugh of Vermandois, Godfrey of Bouillon, or Robert of Flanders. When they arrive in Asia Minor, they face the Seljuk armies. The Byzantine aid promised by Alexios remains ambiguous, as the emperor fears these Western men might stay on his lands. This climate of mistrust does not hinder the Frankish progress, and several cities are conquered. The long siege of Antioch, begun in 1097, ends with the capture of the city in June 1098. The Crusaders then continue their march south, determined to reach Jerusalem. On June 7, 1099, the crusading armies, weakened by battles and epidemics, arrive before Jerusalem. The city, holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, is then under the control of the Fatimids of Egypt after their reconquest over the Seljuk Turks. The assault is difficult. In midsummer, water is scarce, and the inhabitants resist under the direction of Fatimid governor Iftikhar ad-Dawla. The Crusaders build siege towers, transport wood from the coast, and improvise war machines. The assistance of Genoese sailors stationed at Jaffa is crucial. After several days of preparation, a general assault is launched on July 15th. The defenders fail to repel the attack. The wall gives way, and the Crusaders enter the city. The capture of Jerusalem concludes with a massacre. Western chronicles, Raymond of Aguilera, and Arab accounts, Ibn al-Qalanisi, describe extreme violence. Many Muslim and Jewish inhabitants are killed or expelled. Religious motivations, mingled with the exhilaration of victory, lead to this bloody act, seen as a total conflict around a holy place, conducted as a sacred mission. As soon as the city was conquered, the Crusader leaders established a new power, the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Godfrey of Bouillon was named Advocate of the Holy Sepulchre, refusing the crown. Upon his death, his brother Baldwin, Count of Edessa, became king under the name Baldwin the Fair. Other Latin states were formed: the Principality of Antioch, the County of Tripoli, the County of Edessa. These entities, isolated amid a predominantly Muslim and Eastern Christian population, Syriac, Armenian, Greek, forced the Crusaders to strengthen their defenses. They built fortresses, sometimes formed alliances with local Muslim lords, and called in reinforcements from Europe. This Frankish presence in the Holy Land posed new logistical challenges, maintaining an army, administering territories, and protecting routes. At the dawn of the 12th century, Jerusalem became a major destination for many Western pilgrims wishing to visit the Christian holy sites, like the Holy Sepulchre, Mount Zion, and Calvary. Traveling to the Holy Land, even after the 1099 conquest, remained difficult. Ships to cross the Mediterranean were rare and expensive, and the land routes in Asia Minor or Syria were exposed to attacks and passed through steep defiles. The entourage of the Frankish sovereigns became aware of the necessity of aiding these often old or lightly armed travelers. The fortifications, sometimes hastily built, did not sufficiently secure the routes between the coast, particularly the port of Jaffa, a few dozen kilometers from Jerusalem, and the Holy City. Brigands attacked pilgrim caravans, causing raids, looting, kidnappings, and ransoms. The German pilgrim Ceolwulf, traveling around 1102, described dangerous roads where armed groups appeared near the fords and passes. There were not always effective escorts. The wealthier travelers hired their bodyguards, but many advanced praying to arrive alive. Some formed small fraternities for protection, not always succeeding against seasoned robbers. This situation deeply concerned the authorities of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, as the reputation of the Holy City among Western Christians depended on the security of the sites and roads. The call of Pope Urban VII had motivated many to brave the dangers, but frequent assaults risked diverting or massacring the pilgrims. The attacks also slowed essential communications for trade and supplies. This context provoked numerous debates. Who should ensure the security of the routes? Were local barons, who collected taxes, focused on protecting travelers? Were urban militias sufficient? Should diplomacy or payment to Bedouin tribes guarantee neutrality? In the years following the conquest, no single solution became evident. In 1118 or 1119, two French knights, Hugues de Payan, perhaps from Champagne, and Geoffroy de Saint-Omer, a noble from northern France near the Flanders-Artois border, noted the distress of the pilgrims and the vulnerability of the Latin states to neighboring powers. Their project was simple but unprecedented: to create a brotherhood of knights uniting monastic vows with military function to protect travelers in the Holy Land. Influenced by the ideal of Christian chivalry stemming from Gregorian reforms, with Cistercian influences through Bernard of Clairvaux, though not yet involved, they envisioned a small group forming a militia of Christ, a religious order capable of wielding the sword and passively defending the routes. They had little initial support, as the Frankish lords preferred to strengthen their own garrisons. However, Hugues de Payan's reputation facilitated contacts with the royal court of Jerusalem. Baldwin II, who ascended the throne in 1118 after Baldwin I died without a male heir, saw in this idea a systematic protection for pilgrims. During discussions at the palace, Hugues and Geoffroy presented their project: to gather knights ready to take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience like monks, while remaining armed in the field. This approach broke with traditional, more feudal chivalry. Their loyalty was directed toward Christ, embodied by the Church and supported by the King of Jerusalem. Baudouin II sees in it a promising solution: a disciplined group dedicated to securing the roads without overly marked political ambitions. The spiritual project can also attract the support of the Church and the backing of powerful barons, eager to enhance their prestige with Rome. The initiative by Hugues de Payan and Geoffroy de Saint-Omer is discussed at court. Although the order is not yet canonically recognized, they obtain permission to settle on the Temple Esplanade near the ancient sanctuary of Solomon that the Crusaders call Temple of Solomon, but which actually corresponds to the enclosure of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This place, reorganized as a royal residence, later became emblematic of the nascent order. Soon, a few knights join this group, sometimes numbering 9 according to chronicles. These first members devote their lives to Deus Vult, the God wills it of the speeches of the First Crusade, but in a novel form, no longer to conquer militarily, but to defend the weakest. They call themselves Poor Knights of Christ, reject material wealth, and live thanks to alms and donations. In the Frankish society of Jerusalem, this principle surprises. Many believe that a noble fights for his glory and the dominion of territories, while the monk chooses prayer and solitude. Here, a synthesis is created, a clerical mission without renouncing the sword, a humble life while protecting the roads. Mentalities gradually evolve in the face of ever-threatening raids and the vital need to protect pilgrims, essential to the local economy. This initiative gives birth to the idea of an order of sacred chivalry, responding to the spirit of crusade and practical necessities, securing the roads, restoring trust, offering an active religious model. In the following years, this brotherhood grows in influence and numbers, becoming the Order of the Temple that will mark history. In 1119, the order is still in its genesis, examined with caution by King Baudouin II and observed with curiosity by the lords and clerics of the Holy Land. This foundational phase is crucial. It prepares a structured organization devoted to the service of God and the defense of Christians in the East. Without the initiative of Hugues de Payan and Geoffroy de Saint-Omer, the protection of pilgrims would likely have relied on irregular garrisons and the whims of barons. Instead, a devoted group, accepted by the sovereign, transforms the landscape of the Holy Land, creating a spiritual and military actor whose ramifications will soon extend to Europe in search of support and recognition. It is at the heart of the pilgrims' difficulties and under the pressure of regional conflicts that this sacred militia is inscribed. Although it seems revolutionary, it is rooted in a mentality where faith and war are closely linked. After the conquest of Jerusalem, prayer alone is no longer sufficient to keep it. The birth of this group of consecrated knights will soon receive the church's assent and evoke admiration mixed with fear among the local populations. In 1119, the excitement of an innovative plan settles behind the scenes of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, laying the foundations of one of the major orders of the Middle Ages. In the decade following the capture of Jerusalem by the Crusaders, agitation still reigns in the streets of the Holy City. Travelers headed to biblical sites, merchants, or pilgrims face frequent external threats. It is in this context that the idea of actively protecting those traveling to sacred sites emerges. In 1119, a small group of knights, driven by religious zeal and aware of the logistical weaknesses of the new Latin states, gathers to found a military brotherhood, the Poor Knights of Christ. They obtain permission from King Baudouin II to settle near the old temple of King Solomon, called Al-Aqsa by the Muslims, and a major symbol of the Temple Mount. It is there, in this sacred area, with strong Hebrew and Islamic connotations, that these knights take their first vows. The initial group consisted of 9 knights, including Hugues de Payan and Godefroy de Saint-Omer, united by the belief that faith is embodied in armed service for the benefit of the weak and defenseless pilgrims. The Temple of Solomon, built on the site of the ancient Jewish sanctuary, reinforced their commitment, while its Muslim name, Al-Aqsa, highlighted its importance in Islamic tradition. Gathered in this place steeped in Jewish, Christian, and Muslim memory, the 9 men took vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, drawing inspiration from monastic ideals while maintaining their warrior vocation. This alliance between spiritual life and armed defense was unprecedented at the time, with knighthood taking on a communal and sacred dimension, far from the individual quest for glory or wealth. Bernard of Clairvaux, a Cistercian monk born in 1090, quickly drew the attention of influential figures in Western Christendom. As a pillar of the Abbey of Citeaux in Burgundy, aiming to rediscover the austerity of the early Benedictine monks, his charisma soon transcended the borders of the Kingdom of France. Upon hearing about the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, he saw in them the ideal of a sanctified knighthood in service of faith rather than personal ambition. To support this nascent order, Bernard wrote De Laude Novae Militae, in praise of the new knighthood, where he defended the paradoxical idea of a just war, waged with humility and devotion to the divine cause. For an audience still unfamiliar with these nuances, his position legitimized the existence of armed men taking monastic vows, as fighting for the Christian truth could be an act of love guided by virtue and the protection of the innocent. To establish the legitimacy of this military community, a great council was convened in 1129 in Troyes, Champagne. This ecclesiastical gathering, presided over by the papal legate of Pope Honorius II, brought together bishops, abbots, and representatives of the nascent order. Bernard played a major role by articulating the vocation of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. After several days of deliberations, the conciliar fathers adopted the Latin Rule of the Order, a foundational text of 72 articles, blending monastic traditions and military discipline. These articles specified the brothers' daily obligations, collective prayer, abstinence, mutual aid, and absolute obedience. The attire was also codified. The white mantle, a symbol of purity, was chosen for the knights, while the red cross signified the passion of Christ and their sacrificial commitment. The council granted the order full canonical recognition, ensuring moral and spiritual support throughout Christendom. The decisions stabilized the institution's identity and strengthened the cohesion of its members, now perceived as monk knights with a divine mission. Secular powers, sensitized by Bernard's preaching and the solemnity of the council, saw in them a credible partner to defend fragile territories and secure pilgrimage routes. This support paved the way for regular donations and a more structured organization, a prelude to the order's expansion across Europe and the Near East. As soon as the Order of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ was officially recognized by the Church, it received donations from nobles committed to defending the holy places. In Champagne, several lords offered lands and agricultural resources, enabling the order to support itself and welcome new brothers. Anjou, the fief of Count Fulk the Young before he became king of Jerusalem, also proved generous, providing estates destined to construct farms often managed by lay brothers, crucial players in logistics. Among the symbolic donations, the Count of Barcelona, influential in Catalonia, offered a horse named Isarn, renowned for its military robustness. This gift, modest in appearance, was important because cavalry was the most effective armed force, and each quality steed strengthened the knight's power. Legend attributes this horse with exceptional courage, symbolizing the new defenders of the faith. These initial endowments allowed the order to establish a local network of houses, or commanderies, that ensured the supply of food and horses and centralized funds, part of which was sent to the Holy Land to support the Knight brothers near Jerusalem. This embryonic network would quickly spread throughout Europe, creating unprecedented logistics. Every donation, whether it involves estates in Champagne or a horse in Catalonia, is crucial for the vitality of the order. Between 1129 and the following decade, the Poor Knights of Christ gained a reputation, attracting funds and recruits. Emperors, kings, and barons saw in them a means of protection and prestige. Supporting the order was equivalent to defending Christianity. The monk knights managed these endowments with rigor, aware that their credibility depended on transparency and discipline. These resources also allowed the construction of fortifications to protect the pilgrimage routes. The cycle of donations, initiated around 1129, marked a decisive step. The poor Knights of Christ, soon to be called Templars in reference to the Temple of Solomon, were recognized and supported by the Church and European lineages. The simplicity of the initial gifts, a horse, a field, or a mill, cemented the image of an institution at the service of the common good. During the period 1119-1129, the order thus laid the foundations of its existence and growth, based on faith, discipline, and the solidarity of its patrons. Following the recognition from the Council of Troy, new knights joined this fraternity, which was preparing its logistical paths to defend the Latin states and consolidate their presence near the holy cities. Between 1130 and 1149, the Order of the Temple consolidated its bases and built an increasingly vast network in the West, as well as in the Holy Land. Strengthened by the papal approval received a few years earlier, the Knights of Christ undertook to further organize themselves, creating operational centers in various strategic cities. This expansion coincided with King Louis VII, of France's involvement in a new crusade and the emergence of determined leading figures. Under the impulse of the First Brothers in the Levant, the order understood that a solid anchoring in Europe was essential to support military operations in the Holy Land. The knights needed financial resources, food supplies, and trained men, which required the creation of gathering points and logistical relays across the continent. The city of Paris, the capital of the Kingdom of France, quickly became an essential hub. The Templars established their house near the main commercial routes, benefiting from royal protection, and the proximity of the University of Paris, founded at the beginning of the 13th century. In this rapidly developing metropolis, they were able to collect donations, recruit some aspiring knights, and oversee financial transactions, while maintaining good relations with the Capetian monarchy. Across the Channel, London also proved crucial. England was then governed by King Stephen, whose reign between 1135 and 1154 was marked by a period of turmoil known as the Anarchy, related to a succession conflict with Princess Matilda. Despite this instability, the English capital offered strong economic potential thanks to its commercial activity along the Thames and its connection with the major towns in the south of the country. The Templars established a commandery near the river to facilitate the transport of goods and treasures to the ports. They also enjoyed a certain autonomy of management, supported by some local barons seeking spiritual prestige and protection guarantees. This presence in England allowed for a continuous influx of funds and volunteers eager to participate in the order's endeavors in the East. The structuring efforts continued further south, particularly in Pisa, in the northwest of the Italian peninsula. Pisa, one of the four major maritime republics of Italy alongside Genoa, Venice, and Amalfi, was a key crossroads for Mediterranean trade, notably on the route connecting the west to the Holy Land. The Templars, aware of this significance, established a commandery dedicated to naval logistics. Thanks to the Pisan fleet, they could quickly convey reinforcements, supplies, and pilgrims. The income from port taxes and the accommodation of sailors ensured growing financial stability. This network of commanderies transformed into a central grid for consolidating donations, departures to the Levant, and the spiritual and political influence of the Templars in Western Christendom. In 1147, King Louis XVII of France took up the cross for the Second Crusade, responding to the calls from Jerusalem amid tensions with Muslim powers. This expedition was better organized logistically, with the Order of the Temple playing a crucial role. The route passed through the Byzantine Empire and Anatolia, where dangers, raiders, fortresses, and hostile populations were common. The Templars, thanks to their experience and regional connections, served as guides and military advisors, securing the journey, supplying the convoy with water, pack animals, and food, and maintaining the discipline of the soldiers. During the crossing of the Halis River, Kızılırmak, in central Anatolia, harsh weather conditions made the passage dangerous. The Templars built makeshift bridges and managed the crossing in small groups. A marshal nearly drowned, saved in extremis by a sergeant brother of the temple. This demonstrated the trust Louis VII and his barons had in the order for their protection and the practical management of the crusade. As improvised bankers, the Templars also facilitated the payment of wages and the transfer of funds between the royal court and strongholds in the Levant, ensuring discretion and security, qualities recognized by the order. During this period of expansion, the Order of the Temple clarified its hierarchical structure. After Hugues de Payens, Robert de Craon became Grand Master around 1136. Born in Champagne, he was a lay knight before joining the Templars. His term was fruitful. He obtained privileges from Pope Innocent II, notably the Charte Domnium Libertatum, granting tax exemptions and legal protections. The Templars escaped the jurisdiction of many feudal lords, managing their properties without interference. They were able to collect certain ecclesiastical taxes, strengthening their economic base. Robert de Craon also obtained exemption from tithes and tolls, allowing the Templars to transport their goods tax-free, which facilitated supply to the Holy Land and reduced costs. Spiritually, the order affirmed its identity with a rule inspired by Cistercian monasticism, emphasizing obedience, chastity, and the defense of the holy places. The internal hierarchy was structured with a Grand Master and regional dignitaries managing properties and military actions. Robert de Craon strengthened ties with the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Principality of Antioch, coordinating military efforts against Muslim princes while maintaining strategic autonomy. Several fortresses were entrusted or sold to the order, consolidating its presence. Under this Grand Master, the Templars enhanced their strategic role in both the East and the West. With their increased influence and resources, the Templars became an elite weapon for the defense of the Frankish states in the Holy Land. Their discipline, faith, and formidable tactics made them key knights for defending strategic points, acting as a mobile garrison, and leading reconquests against Muslims. In a region with complex terrain, their ability to build and hold fortifications was decisive. Some fortresses adopted a snail plan or shell keep, with a concentric wall resistant to siege engines and minimizing blind spots. In Gaza, Saft, and Bagras, the Order of the Temple used this type of architecture, drawing on Byzantine and Frankish innovations adapted to the local context. These fortresses featured massive towers, solid curtain walls, and often a deep ditch carved into the rock. The Templars maintained garrisons there of knight brothers, sergeants, and Turcopoles, native soldiers familiar with the terrain and local techniques. In these snail castles, the garrison could retreat from one level to another, prolonging resistance and exhausting the assailant. The surrounding topography was also used to confuse the enemy and establish advanced observation posts. These innovations reinforced the Templars' reputation as the military pillars of the Frankish states, preparing them for a major enduring influence. The decades from 1150 to 1187 marked for the Order of the Temple a phase of growth and unparalleled military prestige. The Templars became an essential pillar of defense for the Latin states in the Holy Land after the First Crusade. Under their Grand Masters and with Western financial support, they constructed formidable fortifications, increased their numbers, and perfected their tactics. Faced with the rise of Saladin and the Ayyubid Sultanate, they supported the kings of Jerusalem in decisive battles and secured the pilgrim routes. Despite external pressures, a war economy is taking shape, fueled by orders for weapons, horse breeding, and the rise of European commanderies. On the ground, the order refines its recruitment, structured by a strict hierarchy blending monastic fervor and martial efficiency. In their fortresses, the knights establish a communal life governed by strict rules, daily prayers, dietary austerity, collective discipline. Strengthened by this organization, they achieve successes, notably the Battle of Montgisard in 1177. Linked to the Hospitallers and other military orders, they manage their relations with local lords and neighboring powers, consolidating the Latin presence in the East. This period forges the legend of the Temple, perceived as an invincible order, guided by piety and zeal in combat. The Templar power rests on a hierarchical organization, combining martial efficiency and religious devotion. At the top, the Knight Brothers of noble origin wear the white mantle with a red cross, symbol of their commitment to the Holy Land. On their imposing destriers, they form a heavy cavalry, capable of crushing enemy lines in swift charges. To obtain these robust horses, the order relies on a network of specialized breeding and benefits from donations from the Western nobility, aware of their strategic value. Just below are the sergeant brothers, from modest backgrounds, or the lower nobility, unable to aspire to knighthood. Clad in a dark mantle, they hold the infantry lines, manage logistics, and sometimes lead light cavalry units. Their supporting role is indispensable, ensuring logistic and tactical efficiency. Often more numerous than the knights, they form a versatile pool put to the test in cases of siege or smaller battles. The order calls upon the Turcopoles, indigenous fighters, often Eastern Christians, knowledgeable in languages, climate, and local tactics. Lightly armed, mounted on agile horses, they serve as scouts, patrollers, and auxiliary troops, ensuring communication between garrisons and villages. Their understanding of local customs makes them valuable allies for negotiating peace or avoiding ambushes. Each Knight Brother wears a mail hauberk covering the torso, arms, and sometimes lower body, a helm, a sword, a lance, and a medium shield. The sergeants often wear partial chainmail or pieces of boiled leather. The Turcopoles have light protections favoring mobility. To maintain equipment, the order relies on a network of commanderies in the west, where blacksmiths, armorers, and tanners renew gear. Donations in money and kind from lords and followers support this effort. The internal discipline, based on prayer and monastic rules, consolidates the cohesion of this composite force, determined to defend the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Battle of Montgisard on November 25, 1177, remains one of the greatest Frankish victories. Saladin, the rising Ayyubid Sultan, threatened the Kingdom of Jerusalem with a large army. King Baldwin IV, afflicted with leprosy, defended his capital with outnumbered forces near Ramla. Saladin believed victory was assured, but 84 Templar knights, according to William of Tyre, launched a surprise charge coordinated with Baldwin IV's cavalry, breaking one wing of the Muslim army. Saladin's mounted archers retreated in confusion. Facing panic, Saladin ordered a retreat. This audacity turned the confrontation into a Christian success, proving divine protection of the Holy Land and halting the Ayyubid advance. This victory strengthened the reputation of the order, key to the Frankish defense despite some barons' skepticism. In addition to combat, the Templars invested in reinforcing defenses, drawing inspiration from Byzantine, Armenian, and Islamic architectures to build resilient fortresses. Although Crac des Chevaliers belonged to the hospital, the temple possessed major strongholds like Chastel Blanc, dominating coastal routes. Their fortifications had thick walls, regular towers, dug moats, drawbridges resistant to siege machines, and several successive enclosures for deep defense. The garrisons, composed of knight brothers, sergeants, and auxiliaries, mastered trebuchets and repelled assaults. This construction site required massive funding, ensured by aristocratic donations, collections, and the management of land revenues. A friendly rivalry with the Hospitallers drove each to build more powerful castles, strengthening mutual security. The orders helped each other during major assaults, coordinating their garrisons to trap the enemy. The order also protected the surrounding villagers, who provided supplies, labor, and information. The strongholds became centers of life, with chapels, warehouses, stables, and weapon workshops. By securing merchants and pilgrims, the temple asserted its role as an indispensable bulwark in the eyes of the papacy and Western sovereigns. Despite their aura of relentless warriors, the Templars lived according to a rhythm inspired by Cistercian monasteries. Every morning, they rose for prayer before dawn, then gathered for the office. Silence reigned in the refectory, where the reading of scripture replaced conversation. Meals, frugal, were often composed of black bread, vegetables, and wine, sometimes diluted with water, safer than stagnant water. A ration that could reach 2.5 liters of wine per day is explained by sanitary risks and physical effort. To maintain cohesion, the order enforced strict disciplinary rules. Infractions, lateness, unnecessary words, insolence, led to penances, meals on the ground, or sanctions. Serious offenses such as violence or disobedience led to deprivation of sacraments, temporary or permanent exclusion. The goal was to preserve the unity of a brotherhood, risking their lives together. In the fortresses, each brother had his assignments. Some tended to the stables, others to the making or repairing of armor. Others still kept the supplies or managed the finances. Learning was constant. New sergeants trained in arms, learned Arabic, or surveying for fortifications. Outside the walls, the Templars protected isolated farms, escorted convoys threatened by brigandage, thus reinforcing their local presence and their reputation as a protective order. In free cities like Acre or Tripoli, they collaborated with merchants to secure docks and storage of goods in an economy under tension where every resource counted in case of conflict. The rotation of personnel between the West and the East maintained the order's dynamism. Brothers on mission reported their experiences to European commanderies, while Western recruits discovered the challenges of the Holy Land. This exchange fueled a sense of belonging and promoted the circulation of strategic information. From 1150 to 1187, the Order of the Temple was an essential player in the politics and war in the East. By combining religious fervor and military professionalism, it earned a solid reputation among Christian faithful and Muslim lords who feared and respected it. The austere, action-oriented daily life illustrated this dual vocation of warrior monks, serving a cause greater than themselves. However, by the end of the 12th century, the temple would face new challenges linked to military setbacks and political transformations, upheaving the balance of the Latin kingdoms. On July 4th, 1187, the Battle of the Horns of Hattin, near the Sea of Galilee, today in Israel, marked a decisive turning point for the Latin states in the Holy Land. The crusading forces, Knights of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Templars, and soldiers from other orders, faced the army of Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria. In a context of internal tensions among Frankish barons, the Crusader army, poorly coordinated, found itself surrounded. Thirst, heat, and lack of supplies doomed the knights. Saladin, well acquainted with the terrain, pushed his adversaries toward arid heights. The Crusaders, lacking water and harassed by Muslim archers, lost all cohesion. By noon, the advantage shifted decisively to Saladin. The Latin banners fell, horses died of thirst. Exhausted foot soldiers gathered around the true cross, a precious relic taken into battle and eventually seized by Saladin. This symbolic loss shocked the Christian West, calling into question the divine protection of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Templars paid a heavy price. Their Grand Master Gerard of Ridefort was taken prisoner. The order, which traditionally ensured forward or rear guard, saw many of its knights perish or be captured. The few survivors returned to the citadels of Tripoli or Tyre, still in the hands of Latin lords. The defeat at Hattin triggers a chain reaction. Saladin conquers Jerusalem and several key cities. This fall provokes immense emotion in the West and seems to mark the end of the Frankish presence in the Near East. However, this event also triggers a new mobilization. European sovereigns receive calls for help and hope to organize a larger crusade to overthrow Saladin and restore a Christian kingdom in the Holy Land. For the Order of the Temple, Hattin is a hard blow, but also a spur to rebuild its forces, renew alliances, and convince that the Holy Land is not lost. After the military collapse of 1187, the situation of the Latin states is fragile. Almost all the citadels, except Tyre, threaten to fall. This urgency triggers the Third Crusade, preached at the end of 1187, materialized by the departure of Philip II Augustus and Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart. Their arrival in 1191 breathes life back into the Frankish resistance. The Order of the Temple, decimated at Hattin, rebuilds its ranks thanks to the financial and human support of the expedition. The knights arrive in large numbers near Acre, a vital coastal city for Mediterranean trade and the Syrian-Palestinian hinterland. The Siege of Acre, begun in 1189 by local Frankish lords, becomes an international operation with the arrival of Western kings. The Order of the Temple, despite its losses, plays a strategic role. Its knights, known for their discipline and mastery of heavy cavalry, support the assaults and coordinate decisive charges against Muslim lines. They also participate in attacks around the ramparts, the city resisting thanks to its solid garrison. New siege equipment, towers, catapults, trebuchets reinforce the machines already in place, supervised by engineers and experts of the order. Italian mariners, Genoese and Pisans, secure the naval blockade and supplies. The Templars also organized logistics and fund collection to support the Crusade. Their reputation for reliability convinces barons and merchants from Europe to entrust them with goods and money. They make or receive letters of exchange, credit papers allowing money transfer from commanderies to camps. Despite setbacks and epidemics, Acre falls in July 1191. This victory, the first major success of the Third Crusade, relieves the Latin states. Richard the Lionheart, whose prestige grows, collaborates with the Templars during subsequent operations. The king and the Grand Master, replaced after the capture of Gerard of Rydfort, do not always agree on strategy. The king aims for political and dynastic objectives. The Templars defend the Holy Land and their strongholds, but recognize the need for agreement against Saladin. Several battles follow, until a truce in 1192. This pause does not return Jerusalem, but stabilizes the coastal front and preserves the Latin presence around Acre and a few citadels spared after Hattin. After the Third Crusade and the recapture of Acre, the Latin states must consolidate their defenses with fortresses capable of withstanding assaults. The Order of the Temple improves existing sites and builds new ones along the coast to secure a defensive arc protecting ports and serving as a base for expeditions inland. The major achievement of the 13th century is the Pilgrims' Castle, Athlit, on a rocky promontory 30 kilometers south of Haifa, with a natural cove for direct supply from Europe and walls up to 3 meters thick. The Templars, aided by local and Frankish artisans, construct wide moats, watchtowers, high curtain walls, and underground galleries for storing water and provisions. This bastion reflects the desire for a lasting foothold on the coastline. With the reconquest of Jerusalem compromised, the Templars bet on coastal control to have fallback points. Other fortresses are reinforced like Sidon, Beirut, and Tortosa. Athlit symbolizes Western military power and engineering. Its high walls facing the sea and vast courtyards accommodate religious and military life. The garrison, composed of knights, sergeants, and local auxiliaries, controls the coastal plain and communicates by fires or optical signals with the towers of Acre. Beyond its defensive role, Château Pèlerin serves as a passageway for pilgrims. Genoese, Pisan, and Venetian ships bring soldiers and travelers for the holy sites. The Templars manage the reception, protect the route to Acre, and sometimes beyond when diplomacy allows it. This maritime control enhances the Order's reputation as a guarantor of safety in the Eastern Mediterranean. From the end of the 12th century and through the first half of the 13th, the Templars understand that the Frankish presence in the Holy Land also depends on punctual alliances, crucial for the balance between Latins, Muslims, and small autonomous states. Among these, the sect of the Assassins, Ismaili Shiites, known for their isolated fortresses and brutal actions, is the subject of negotiations with some temple masters. These masters believe that the neutrality or goodwill of the Assassins can offer respite against powers like Saladin. The negotiations result in a symbolic arms treaty. The Order and the Assassins agree not to attack each other and to inform each other about enemies. This medieval realpolitik, criticized by some Frankish chroniclers, is seen by others as a way to secure corridors between Latin fortifications and ports, reducing deadly raids. Furthermore, diplomatic contacts with Muslims persist even in times of conflict. Notable example, the purchase of wheat from Damascus. The Latin lands, often suffering from drought or supply disruptions, buys cereals in the Damascus region thanks to the Templars' treasury and commercial relations. Several contracts attest to these transactions, showing that battlefield rivals can be trade partners. These policies of alliance and commerce allow the Latin states and the Templars to maintain themselves despite a precarious geopolitical balance. The internal Muslim struggles, the Mongol intervention in the east, and the Byzantine ambitions on Anatolia make the Outremer unstable. The Templars must deal with Christian and Muslim lords to protect vital routes or ward off threats. This diplomacy, often misunderstood in Europe, reflects the pragmatism of warriors defending each position. Recourse to treaties, extortions, or peaceful negotiations is part of a survival strategy. Between 1188 and 1244, after the disaster at Hattin, the Templars consolidate their coastal strongholds, renew alliances, and ensure the stable supply of Frankish garrisons and populations. This period shows their adaptability, ready to negotiate but always determined to defend Latin possessions. The outlook remains bleak, with Muslim sovereigns advancing and Christian divisions undermining cohesion. However, the construction of Chateau Pèlerin and non-aggression or commercial agreements reveal the order's will to ensure Latin continuity despite setbacks. The loss of the True Cross and the capture of Gérard de Riedfort symbolize the fragility after 1187. But the reconstruction proves that nothing is permanently decided. Compromise, tenacity, and strategy keep the Temple's banner flying on the ramparts, at least for a time. In the mid-13th century, the Latin presence in the Holy Land faces powerful opposing forces. The Frankish states, supported by the Templars, struggle to maintain their territories against the rise of Egyptian sultans, Ayyubids, and later Mamluks. Despite setbacks, new campaigns attempt to consolidate Frankish control over the Mediterranean coast and the fortresses still in the hands of the Crusaders. Between 1245 and 1291, battles, sieges, and diplomatic negotiations succeed one another to slow the retreat. In 1248, the French king Louis IX, future St. Louis, undertakes the Seventh Crusade to aid the Christians of the East. He chooses Egypt, the economic and military core of the Muslim world, and lands near Damietta, north of the Nile Delta. The Templars join the expedition to support the king, who hopes to strike the Ayyubid Empire. From the start of the siege, tensions arise between Louis IX and the Order regarding the course of action after the capture of Damietta. In the autumn of 1249, the Crusaders seize Damietta, abandoned by the Muslim defenders. Louis IX sets up his camp and wants to advance quickly along the Nile to surprise the enemy. The Templars prefer to first consolidate positions around Damietta, fearing isolation against counteroffensives. The Nile, subject to heavy flooding and protected by rival fortresses, is a major obstacle. Louis IX and his advisors believe that a quick offensive will surprise the enemy. The divergences are intensifying. The Templars insist on the necessity of secure logistical lines and control over the hostile local population. The king chooses offense. After several months, the Crusader army falters and is encircled at Mansoura in early 1250. The battle is a disaster. Louis IX is taken prisoner, and several Templars die or perish in captivity. After negotiations, the king and his knights are released for a hefty ransom, marking the end of the campaign. After the disastrous enterprise in Egypt, the Latin states attempt to reorganize their defenses. In the 1260s, sporadic alliances formed between Frankish princes, Cilician Armenians, and Mongol troops, making initial incursions into the Near East. This cooperation remains limited by mistrust and geographical distance. The Mamluks, masters of Egypt after the fall of the Ayyubids, become the rising power. Under Baybars, their attacks multiply against the weakened Christian strongholds in the Levant. In 1266, Safed in Galilee, a Templar garrison protecting the roads between Acre and Jerusalem, becomes a major target. The Mamluks launch a methodical siege. The Templars request reinforcements from Acre, but coordination with the Frankish lords is difficult. Mongol support does not arrive. After several weeks, the weakened garrison surrenders. Baybars executes a portion of the defenders, sending a clear message: resistance is increasingly difficult. In 1268, Jaffa, a strategic port city south of Acre, suffers a similar fate. Despite late reinforcements, the Templars cannot hold back the Mamluk tide. The city falls, its defenses dismantled. Survivors retreat northward, bringing tales of ruin that undermine the morale of the Latin states. All attempts at coordination with the Armenian kingdom and the Mongols fail due to a lack of a common plan and trust. The noose tightens around the remaining Crusader enclaves. By 1291, the situation for the Crusaders in the Holy Land is critical. Acre, the last major Frankish city, houses a mixed population of European merchants, Latin settlers, and representatives of military orders like the Templars and Hospitallers. The Mamluk advance, led by Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil, son of Kalawun, conquers the last Frankish possessions. The Templars feverishly strengthen Acre's walls, request troops from Europe, and aid from Cyprus, another Frankish base. Pope Nicholas IV calls for help, but the Western response is marginal as enthusiasm for the Crusades has waned. In April 1291, the Mamluk army surrounds Acre and begins a systematic siege. Mangonels and trebuchets bombard the fortifications. Under the leadership of their Grand Master Guillaume de Beaujeu, the Templars launch counterattacks, but the enemy's numerical superiority is decisive. In May, the walls give way, and the exhausted defenders watch the enemy advance. Mortally wounded during a sortie, Guillaume de Beaujeu declares, "I am dead. Here is my lord." The last stand is organized in the Templars' castle, already damaged. Despite some reinforcements, the situation remains desperate. By the end of May 1291, the walls collapse under Mamluk attacks, marking the fall of Acre. Defenders refusing to surrender are massacred, others escape by sea. This event signals the end of the organized Frankish presence in the Holy Land and the direct ambitions for Jerusalem. After the fall, Templars, Hospitallers, and survivors retreat to Cyprus, the main Western refuge in the Eastern Mediterranean. This Latin kingdom, founded by the Lusignans in the 12th century, offers a safe base and a starting point for future expeditions. Deprived of Acre, the Templars restore their treasure, reorganize their ranks, and maintain the order's cohesion. The loss evokes emotion, and the idea of a new crusade persists in speeches. In the following years, the order seeks massive funding in Europe, but rulers are absorbed in their conflicts, like France-England or the tensions between the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire. Fundraising remains insufficient for an ambitious reconquest. The popes issue several calls, but enthusiasm declines. On the island, the Templars attempt to reconcile monastic vows with maintaining a martial arrangement. The surviving knights, often wounded or traumatized, prepare for possible combats. The sergeants and Turcopoles struggle to adapt, far from their lands. Eager to regain a foothold in Syria, the leaders hope for a collective European movement. But the Mamluks remain inaccessible by land, and the fleet is too costly. Despite promises from princes of Central and Iberian Europe, the means are lacking. The Hospitallers, consolidating roads, prefer maritime defense and occasional naval offensives. The Templars still dream of the Holy Land, but the lack of capital and moral exhaustion blunt their resolve. The years pass without major operations. The loss of the Holy Land is irreversible, and Cyprus is only a reprieve before other challenges arise from Europe. Yet, some knights, in their faith, still hope for the recapture of Jerusalem, believing a resurgence among monarchs possible despite political divisions. Since the mid-12th century, the Order of the Temple has expanded its influence in the West to better support its actions in the Holy Land. This European empire develops in several areas: agriculture, banking system, maritime transport, and internal administration. The Templars, far from the battlefield alone, emerge as skilled managers, using resources from rural commanderies, developing innovative financial mechanisms, and consolidating their power via a commercial fleet. From England to the Iberian Peninsula, passing through Burgundy and Italy, they create a vast network serving their military projects and their spiritual and temporal authority. This section details the organization of this network between agricultural exploitation, logistics, and judicial structures from the 12th to the early 14th century. To finance the maintenance of overseas fortresses and support troops in the east, the Templars turned to the lands of Europe. From the 1150s onward, they received numerous donations and organized these assets into commanderies, establishments where a few brothers live, aided by sergeants or lay domestics. Their aim is to optimize harvests, livestock, and generate stable income for the order. The lands of Puy-Dôme in Burgundy are among the oldest possessions of the Temple in France, renowned for vineyards and cereals. Burgundy, already rich in monasteries, Cluny-Citeaux, facilitates methodical and profitable agriculture. The Templars use this expertise to ensure regular supply locally and for other sites within the kingdom. Beyond France, the order also establishes itself in Aragon, benefiting from the Reconquista, which favors the transfer of lands to military orders, valuable allies against Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula. Aragon is strategic, direct access to the Mediterranean, facilitating the transit of goods and the movement of armed men. There, the Templars develop livestock and olive cultivation, aided by a sunny climate. The merino sheep, more southern, are raised in these commanderies, allowing the order to benefit from the fine wool, highly sought after in Europe. The income from this wool constitutes a significant supplement to the Templar coffers. In England, the order receives various lands from the late 12th century. The site of Temple Brewer in Lincolnshire aptly illustrates the Templar occupation strategy. Vast rural spaces organized around churches, barns, and modest but functional defensive buildings. Temple Brewer serves as an economic and logistical hub, ensuring the breeding of diverse livestock, including cattle and sheep, and providing wool to the major regional fairs. These possessions multiply in England, forming a network linking London to the Channel ports. Agricultural revenue from France, Aragon, or England finances the construction and maintenance of defensive structures in the Holy Land and allows the order to accumulate capital reinvested in a more profitable sector, banking. While the Templars build a land network, they simultaneously develop a pioneering banking system. From the late 12th century, their European commanderies, interconnected by trade routes and pilgrim flows, become deposit and fund transfer points. Securing the transport of cash being difficult, the order creates the first letters of credit. Against the deposit of gold or silver, the traveler receives a deposit slip, exchangeable in another commandery. The solidity of the system relies on the hierarchy of the order and the obedience of the brothers, ensuring authenticity and trust. Each commandery has a chest with 3 keys, held by the commander, the treasurer, and a dignitary, limiting theft and embezzlement. This caution, reinforced by the vow of poverty and austerity, creates an aura of financial integrity. Merchants, nobles, and sovereigns entrust their wealth to the order, confident in a religious organization obedient to the Pope, less prone to bankruptcy than secular money changers. An episode illustrates the financial notoriety of the Temple, the ransom of King Louis IX of France, a prisoner in 1250 after the Battle of Mansoura during the 7th Crusade. Unable to mobilize all the funds from Egypt, the French court relies on the Templars to transport and guarantee the balance via their networks. The Commandery of Paris plays a crucial role, providing part of the reserves and ensuring the transport. This event demonstrates the power and efficiency of the Templar financial system, reinforcing their reputation throughout Christendom. In addition to their agricultural and banking activities, the Templars maintain a fleet essential for the transport of pilgrims, goods, and sometimes troops. From the second half of the 12th century, faced with the necessity of supplying overseas, the order understands that controlling maritime routes is crucial. Several strategic ports on the Atlantic coast and in the Mediterranean come under Templar influence. La Rochelle, on the west coast of the Kingdom of France, becomes a key link in the naval system, allowing coastwise trade to England, Ireland, and other shores. Ships load food, wool, wine from Guyenne, and salt from the marshes before returning north, ensuring income and vital logistical connections between northern and southern European possessions. Further south, the port of Saint-Gilles, near the Rhone Delta, is also an important hub. Located in the county of Toulouse, near Provence, it allows access to Italy and the Iberian Peninsula. Ships sometimes follow the coast to Marseille, then head to Genoa or Pisa, or take the route to Barcelona or Valencia, linking the Aragon commanderies and key western points. These ports are not just commercial auxiliaries, they also serve as rallying points for transporting knights, sergeants, weapons, and horses to Mediterranean or Eastern fronts. The Templars, trained or recruiting experienced sailors, secure their convoys with armed escorts to limit pirate or competitor attacks. Regular navigation from La Rochelle or Saint-Gilles extends to Lisbon, Portugal. From the 13th century, the Portuguese kingdom maintains excellent relations with the order, granting it lands and customs privileges in gratitude for its military aid against the Almohads. Lisbon, with its economic growth, becomes a hub for fish, wine, and oil trade, and a departure point for expeditions to North Africa or England via the Atlantic coast. In a few decades, the order builds a coherent maritime network, linking major possessions and commanderies via strategic and commercial stops. This network complements the land-based grid of farms and financial centers, enabling the rapid transport of goods, money, and equipment to areas in need. Despite their warrior orientation and religious vows, the Templars leave nothing to chance in terms of discipline and internal administration. As soon as they possess assets in Europe, they establish strict rules to maintain cohesion. Visitors, Officers mandated by the master conduct annual visitations. They verify property management, accounting, building maintenance, and compliance with the rule. They question the brothers, note abuses or shortcomings, report to the higher echelon, and sometimes impose immediate sanctions. The Templar prisons in some major commanderies maintain relatively decent conditions while remaining severe according to the severity of the offenses. Brothers guilty of theft, violence, or disobedience undergo psychospiritual penance with isolation, prayers, and fasting. Regulations prohibit endangering the captive's health, as a brother remains tied to the order until he is excluded. Punishment may be eased in cases of sincere remorse. For complex matters, embezzlement, breach of vows, insubordination, a chapter of fault or closed trial is organized, with brother knights of equal or higher rank and a dignitary presiding. Confidentiality safeguards the honor of the order and prevents exposing its weaknesses. Testimonies and deliberations are solemn. The accused can defend themselves with an assistant. The sentence, derived from monastic and military law, can be reprimand, confinement, or expulsion. Forced confessions are theoretically prohibited, but moral pressure sometimes exists. This rigorous judicial organization contributes to the prestige and efficiency of the order. No misconduct escapes the system. These secret trials refute the idea that the Templars are untouchable. The hierarchy and control ensure uniformity of behavior from sergeant to provincial master. Submission to the rule and the general chapter gives coherence and allows the order to preserve its identity, balancing piety with firmness across the continent. Through these four pillars, agricultural commanderies, banking system, fleet, and internal justice, the Order of the Temple became a transnational power between 1150 and 1307. Its lands produced the necessary food for brothers on the front, its bank protected and circulated royal and seigneurial capital, its navy facilitated exports and rapid movement of soldiers, its justice maintained cohesion. This network aroused jealousy, particularly among European monarchies, especially France, facing treasury issues. Until the early 14th century, the Templar organization continued to operate, offering numerous services to the powerful, marking Europe with farm fortresses, port counters, and hermetic commanderies. The entry ceremonies attest to the importance of the institutions. The aspirant takes an oath before the Templar altar, surrounded by experienced brothers in agriculture, finance, marine, and military, embodying an unstoppable force. These men, noble or from modest lineages, live in a codified sphere where silence and obedience reign, and where wealth should never shake the ideal of poverty of the rule. This contradiction, a poor order but with great wealth, rests on collective poverty. The goods belong to the order and its mission, not to individuals. From this perspective, the agricultural, banking, naval, and judicial dimensions form a coherent whole at the service of Jerusalem and the land of Christ. This economic and administrative machinery, perfected through crises, aims to defend the faith and ensure the survival of brothers in the East. Secular critiques see a temporal appetite, but the sacred rhetoric justifies expansion through the military and spiritual mission. Nevertheless, tensions with civil authorities and secular clergy persist, notably on tithes, tax exemptions, and rights of justice, often settled behind the scenes with papal support or Templar diplomatic negotiations. Ultimately, the Temple Empire in the West, from 1150 to 1307, is not a feudal conglomerate. It rests on a sacred mission and an original model of governance. The agricultural commanderies ensure self-sufficiency and income, the banking system monetary reliability for sovereigns, the fleet connects Europe to the Eastern Mediterranean, and internal justice guarantees the discipline of a religious and military order. From timber to oriental spices, each element is part of a global project carried by knights, competent sergeants, and the respectful fear inspired by the order in medieval society. Thanks to this structure, the temple supported its distant garrisons, sometimes besieged, and maintained an effective information network to react to political or military threats. Its exceptional logistics allowed a message from London to reach Marseille in a few weeks, followed by funds and letters of credit, converted locally to arm a maritime convoy. The reputation of the order rested on its military exploits and organizational prowess, inspiring admiration and concern. The balance between austerity and efficiency is seen at every level. A responsible brother managed stocks to feed the community and send shipments to commanderies lacking flour. A treasurer collected the gold of lords to keep it safe. In the evening, everyone respected monastic silence, aware that this network of men and goods constituted a major force of Christendom. If the order had kept only its role as protector of pilgrims, it would not have gained this power. The need to support the fighters propelled innovation, creating a synergy between agricultural rents, banking services, fleet, and internal judicial rules. These elements, organized by generations of masters, formed an economic and institutional empire, foreshadowing modern multinationals. At the dawn of the 14th century, the structure remained solid, but the order began to arouse the suspicion of some kings seeking new resources. The latent tensions in 1300 would soon erupt. From 1150 to 1307, the European Empire of the Temple was a model of management where agriculture, banking, fleet, and justice served a sacred militia at the heart of medieval Western society. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ, or Templars, were born at the beginning of the 12th century to protect pilgrims in Jerusalem. Their identity rests on a dual religious and military vocation. Like monks, they take vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience while fighting those who threaten Christian sanctuaries. This fusion of monastic and knightly qualities gives the order a unique charisma to pray, act in charity, and bear arms. Their days follow the liturgy in Latin, with regular offices, and Psalm 118 is often recited. The meditation on the Psalms and Gospels cultivates a spiritual strength that reflects in their courage. The community is the heart of Templar life. In the Holy Land, discipline follows the regime of regular canons with the recitation of the divine office. The brothers must exhibit exemplary behavior, respect the hierarchy, and place the common mission above their interests. Obedience is essential, especially in combat. The order forms a unit of prayer and action, always vigilant to defend pilgrims and Latin territories. The young receive theological instruction and train in horsemanship and siege warfare. This balance between sword and gospel embodies the miles Christi, praised by Bernard of Clairvaux. This monastic and military union, formalized at the Council of Troyes in 1129 by the Latin rule, was unprecedented. The order formalizes the warrior monk with a rigorous asceticism in morals and material management. Humility is expressed by simple clothing and the renunciation of wealth, charity by the protection of the weak. Bravery is legitimized as a service rendered to God by fighting for the faith. Armor, swords, and lances become sacred instruments to serve divine justice. This alliance of prayer and combat would become the hallmark of the Templars in Western Europe. They would inspire other orders combining spiritual discipline and military efficiency. Latin and Muslim chroniclers of the 12th and 13th centuries highlight their bravery and perseverance. The Order of the Temple embodies the ultimate union of Christian spirituality and armed defense of holy sites. The order asserts its identity through strong symbols, notably the Post-Acre banner, a two-colored fabric, black on top, white on the bottom. This duality symbolizes the struggle between light and darkness, white for purity, moral integrity and sanctity, black for sin and the firmness to combat it. On the battlefields, the Post-Acre gathers chaplain brothers, sergeants, and knights. For the adversary, it embodies the determination of an elite fighting for Christ. Another unmistakable signature, the seal depicting two knights riding the same horse. This iconographic episode refers to the modest origins of the order, when, according to tradition, the first Templars lacked resources, forced to share a charger. Beyond material poverty, the symbol glorifies mutual assistance and brotherhood. Affixing this seal on acts or correspondence signified the commitment of a solidary order, united by a common ideal. Recognizable among all, it emphasized the community identity over personal splendor. For some historians, this image also reinforces the idea of an order not inclined to individual enrichment, despite the considerable donations received over the years. The clothing of the Knight brothers also has a highly symbolic function. As soon as they officially enter the order, the novice receives a white mantle, a sign of renunciation of secular vanities and consecration to the divine cause. After obtaining papal privileges, the outfit is completed with a red cross sewn on the left shoulder. The color evokes the blood shed by Christ during his passion, as well as the blood that the Templar is prepared to shed to defend the faith. Wearing the cross publicly signifies one's adherence to a sacred order and readiness to die as a martyr. From the youngest sergeant to the Grand Master, each wears a uniform expressing the strength of a solemn promise before God and the Christian community. These symbols spread through medieval stories. The Post-Acre banner flutters in key battles, and the seal showing two knights appears on preserved administrative documentation. To posterity, this dual language, image and text, has forged the Templar aura. Contemporaries, whether supporters or enemies, associate the order with ideals of purity, discipline, and rigor. This evocative symbolic system continues to influence the collective imagination, reminding us of the ardent faith and exemplary solidarity of the Knights of Christ. Even during their existence, the uniqueness of the Templars fueled popular imagination. Medieval tales gradually elevate the monk knights to protagonists of marvelous stories. One of the most famous is that of the Holy Grail, recounted as early as the end of the 12th century by Chrétien de Troyes in The Story of the Grail, or Percival. While Chrétien does not explicitly mention the Templars, many later authors propose the idea that these guardians of the Holy Land might also have preserved the sacred cup that collected Christ's blood. Over time, the quest for the Grail embodies the search for spiritual truth, linking the Templar to the chivalric spirit and sacred mission. An esoteric tradition would later develop the theory that the Templars discovered biblical secrets or treasures under the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Excavations carried out in the underground of this site fuel rumors, ancient manuscripts, relics, sacred instruments. This thesis, relayed by esoteric writers, nourishes the vision of an order holding occult knowledge capable of disrupting the balance of powers. The hypotheses vary: Christian gnosis, heritage of biblical kings, Egyptian or Persian wisdom. Another legend touches on the so-called Baphomet idol. During the trials against the order by Philip IV, inquisitors claimed that the Templars worship a bearded head. The confessions, often obtained under torture, mention Baphomet, a previously unknown name. For the accusers, this head would prove heretical worship. Many historians see it as an invention to justify the order's dissolution. Others think it a misunderstanding. Baphomet might derive from Muhammad, as the Templars sometimes communicated with Muslim groups, which could have sparked rumors of syncretism. After the fall of the order in the 14th century, voices in its defense could no longer be heard. The silence imposed by persecution and the dispersal of the brothers reinforced the allegations. Fictional texts, folklore, and esoteric literature transformed the Templars into guardians of treasures, possessors of forbidden grimoires, or masters of secret societies. Although most are based on extrapolations, their success lies in the strength of medieval imagination. To the public, the Templar remains an extraordinary crusader protected by mysteries. Today, novels, films, conspiracy theories, and video games exploit this legacy of legends. Through the quest for the Grail, or the enigma of the bearded head, the Templar myth endures, symbolizing an eternal thirst for the marvelous and the sacred. The Order of the Temple, having become an object of fantasies, remains a guiding thread of medieval imagination between real history, theology, mysticism, and fiction. Despite the uniqueness of its status, the Order of the Temple must coexist with other military monastic communities. Alongside the Templars, there are the Hospitallers of St. John of Jerusalem, and later the Teutonic Knights, active in the Baltic states. On paper, there is cooperation. Each defends the Holy Land and pilgrims. In reality, the competition sometimes becomes rivalry, particularly for control of resources or obtaining privileges. Some historians report that Templars and Hospitallers disputed over customs revenues, strategic mills, or ports for fresh troops. In Cyprus, the fallback base for the Latins from the end of the 12th century, the Hospitallers emphasize their role as healers and hosts, while the Templars concentrate on fortifications and offensive organization. These divergent orientations create frictions. Each order seeks the support of the Pope. The Hospitallers build fortified commanderies, while the Templars value their strongholds as bastions. The papacy often has to intervene to resolve conflicts and ensure minimal cohesion. Papal mediation is essential. Papal bulls sometimes impose the sharing of tithes or the exchange of territories. For the papacy, the unity of the orders is vital against the Islamic powers. But this unity remains fragile, threatened by ambitions, the pursuit of recognition, and the management of conquests. The Hospitallers, well-funded, want to increase their influence. The Templars want to preserve their autonomy. While solidarity often results from necessity, it does not exclude jealousy and tensions. The Templars, wealthy and well-regarded by the papacy, arouse envy. But in decisive battles, they join forces with the Hospitallers against the common peril, showing the strength of armed fraternity when the survival of the Frankish states is at stake. The Order of the Temple, faithful to its martial monastic charism, defends its identity while also working, if necessary, for collective defense. These complex relationships forge the image of an order that is cooperative but mindful of its uniqueness. Sources highlight that between external threats and competitive emulation, the military orders learned to navigate evolving diplomatic and geopolitical stakes. Each imposed its mark on the history of Outremer. The spiritual and warrior adventure of the Temple, nourished by symbols and legends, remains one of the major chapters of the medieval period due to its religious significance and the strength of its legacy. Between 1302 and 1314, the Kingdom of France undergoes profound political and economic upheavals. Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair, has reigned since 1285 and faces multiple conflicts, including one against the Flemish. The latter, formidable soldiers and merchants, want to preserve their independence from the crown. In 1302, the Battle of the Golden Spurs near Courtrai ends in a heavy French defeat. This debacle weakens royal authority, shakes the nobility, and heavily burdens finances. The military campaigns to reclaim Flanders are costly, and the royal treasury is depleted. The king therefore seeks new sources of funding. He levies exceptional taxes, solicits the clergy, or borrows, notably from Lombard bankers or the Order of the Temple. The Temple, thanks to its network of commanderies and its reliability in financial management, is a potential partner. But the royal debt accumulates, and tension rises between the monarchy and large economic establishments. In this context of weakened power and urgent need for liquidity, the future of the Templars, established in France since the 12th century, is at stake. On October 13, 1307, by direct order of Philip IV, all the Templars in France are simultaneously arrested. The operation, orchestrated by a network of officers, seneschals, and bailiffs, relies on closed letters. A formula like "God is not pleased" would have justified the action, although considered apocryphal by some historians. This evocation shows how the attack on the order is cloaked with a religious veneer, serving royal ambitions. Before dawn, hundreds of knights, sergeants, and servants are imprisoned without warning. The operation even surprises the order's dignitaries. Few understand what is happening. The official charges are heresy, renouncing Christ, and various sacrilegious acts. This sweep also permits Philip IV to confiscate Templar properties, lands, treasuries, fortresses, commanderies. The arrest on October 13, 1307, marks the beginning of a major crisis, leading to the end of the Order of the Temple in France and having significant repercussions throughout Latin Christendom. Within weeks of the arrests, interrogations multiply. The Templars are transferred to royal or ecclesiastical prisons, where they are pressured to confess to crimes initially denied. The Grand Master Jacques de Molay, arrested in Paris, becomes the primary target of the Inquisition. Accused of heresy and blasphemy, he undergoes coercive methods including torture, common at the time to obtain confessions. As trials proceed, the Inquisition raises several charges: renunciation of Christ, idol worship, spitting on the cross, obscene kisses, nocturnal rites. The symbolic spitting on Christ stirs controversy. Some Templars, under suffering or despair, end up signing confessions or admitting sacrilegious acts during initiations. Ecclesiastical judges rely on these confessions to extend detention and tarnish the order's reputation. However, many modern historians highlight the low value of these confessions extracted under torture, a frequent phenomenon in other heresy trials. For Philip IV, this scandal strengthens the legitimacy of his offensive against the Templars and facilitates the seizure of their assets. The ecclesiastics, caught between a rock and a hard place, hesitate to thwart the king. Jacques de Molay, after admitting certain accusations to avoid torture, later recants his confessions, initiating a tug-of-war between the king and the Pope. The real guilt of the Templars remains a significant historiographical debate. In the Middle Ages, the accusation of heresy is a power tool, often used to eliminate political rivals or seize their properties. Philip IV, in financial crisis, sees in the downfall of the order a double opportunity to reclaim immense land and banking assets and to weaken a prestigious institution. To legitimize his action, he needs papal support. Pope Clement V, based in Poitiers, finds himself at the heart of a diplomatic dilemma. The pontiff wants to protect the religious orders dependent on the Holy See, without directly opposing Philip IV, whose aggressive policy had already caused serious conflicts with Rome. In 1303, he had arrested Boniface VIII at Anagni, outrage of Anagni. Clement V, to avoid a new crisis, convenes papal commissions on the Templar case. But the gravity of the accusations and the king's pressure quickly steered the debate towards the dissolution of the order. Legally, the investigations, particularly at the Council of Vienne 1311-1312, produce contradictory testimonies. Outside of France, some brothers assert their innocence and acknowledge only the Holy See. In Castile and Portugal, the authorities refuse to persecute them and sometimes reallocate their properties. But in Northern Europe, Terra Transalpina, the majority sides with the king and follow papal directives. Some prelates denounce an instrumentalization of faith for temporal purposes. In this climate of suspicion, many note the absence of tangible evidence of heresy. Yet, the royal pressure, the weakness of Clement V, and the prospect of material gains seal the fate of the order. In 1314, Jacques de Molay is sentenced to death and executed in Paris. The order dissolved, disappears, while Philip IV consolidates his power. For many historians, this downfall illustrates the complexity of the relationships between church, politics, and economic interests in the 14th century. The period from 1302 to 1314 marks a turning point. The king's financial difficulties, exacerbated by conflicts in Flanders, lead to a policy of targeted accusations against an influential order. The arrests on October 13, 1307, the forced confessions, and the internal divisions of Christendom seal their fate. Despite doubts about heresy, the order's image is durably affected. The monarchy enriches itself and strengthens its authority. The papal support from Clement V remains ambiguous. Constrained by Philip IV, he could not maintain his protection. This episode reveals the complexity of throne-altar relationships at the turn of the 14th century. Beyond the disappearance of a religious military institution, the entire medieval society is shaken. The consequences of this crisis will be felt for decades, heralding the emergence of a more centralized, monarchical state. At the turn of 1312, the future of the Order of the Temple is sealed by the papal decision at the Council of Vienne. Convened since October 1311, the high ecclesiastical bodies seek to decide, reform the Templar institution, subject it to a new rule, or abolish it. The trial, initiated in 1307 under the pressure of Philip IV, has stirred rumors, doctrinal controversies, and accusations of heresy. Clement V, then Pope, wants to end the scandal, fearing a crisis of opinion. After hearing cardinals, legates, and prelates, he issues, on March 22, 1312, the Bull Vox in Excelso, which officially dissolves the Order of the Temple. The reasons cited: public scandal, persistent suspicions, and the risk of schism. The council thus closes the case, sealing the fate of the Templars. The bull formalizes the suppression of the order, but also provides for the almost complete transfer of Templar possessions to the Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem, a charitable and military organization well established in the East and West. This measure aims to preserve the strategic and spiritual utility of the confiscated properties. Castles, fortresses, farms, houses, and mills were part of a vast international Templar network. Now, the Hospitallers inherit this logistics. However, an exception applies to the Iberian Peninsula. In Castile, Aragon, and Portugal, the transfer is not immediate. The monarchs prefer to keep control of some key commanderies for frontier defense. The ongoing Reconquista requires autonomous military means. Entrusting all the fortresses to the Hospitallers could weaken the local balance. Negotiations with the papacy drag on, illustrating the geopolitical complexity of this redistribution. The implementation of the bull remains delicate. The individual fate of the former Brothers of the Temple after the dissolution is a major issue. The bull does not condemn each member. It dissolves the order while leaving room for pardoning those without proof of heresy. The clergy examine individual cases. Some brothers, hurt, choose to withdraw from the world. Others wish to continue an active religious life in various communities or with the Hospitallers. Modest retreats, funded by diocesan or royal pensions, allow the older or infirm to avoid begging. But the reputation remains tainted. Even innocent, several opt for discretion. The case of the commander of Limassol in Cyprus illustrates these dilemmas. Before the dissolution, he managed an important commandery. Refusing to join the Hospitallers, fearing new accusations, he chooses hermitage, praying and tending a garden. For him, voluntary exile becomes synonymous with serenity. Others prefer to remain active, some joining the Order of St. John to continue defending strongholds. The majority remains uncertain, dependent on irregular financial support, and sometimes unwelcoming local institutions. The economic impact is considerable. The temple's centrally managed properties formed a vast agricultural network. Their disappearance creates a void. No one to collect rents, pay peasants, maintain buildings. Secular authorities claim a share of the revenue. The Hospitallers claim legitimacy, according to the bull. In Toulouse, the county recovers 50,000 livres tournois, used to consolidate alliances and authority. But this windfall is not enough to avoid crises. Tensions with neighboring lords increase. The Languedoc becomes the scene of complex renegotiations, mixing commerce and feudalism. In several European lordships, many contracts signed with the Templars become void or require renegotiation. Fishing rights, forest usage, tolls on passageways fall into legal limbo. Without a legitimate Templar interlocutor, peasants and craftsmen contest certain taxes. The Hospitallers sometimes face mistrust from populations attached to the former administration or defiant of the new authorities. In remote provinces, several years are sometimes necessary to reach a satisfactory agreement. Records tell of the partial collapse of once stable rents. Local wars, border reconfigurations, and succession disputes exacerbate the situation. Historians note several periods of administrative vacancy. This lack of continuity leads to a drop in revenues, unmaintained mills, uncontrolled tolls, depopulated markets. The financial balance of the temple crumbles. Despite everything, the Order of the Hospital tries to restore lost efficiency. With its experience in the Holy Land, It has centralized structures and a well-established hierarchy, capable of absorbing new domains. Official visitors inventory the properties, estimate their value, and organize the revival of production. The transition is sometimes smooth, where the hospitaller presence is old and known. But the task remains immense, restoring fortifications, repairing barns, reactivating trade routes, recruiting tax collectors. The Templar dissolution acts as a catalyst for change. Some villages emancipate themselves, others submit to the hospital or to secular lords. Alliances are redistributed. Rome watches this recomposition, fearing that the allocation of temple properties might provoke new conflicts. The period 1312–1330 shapes a new socio-economic balance whose imprint endures. The Bull Vox, in Excelso of 1312, triggered an unprecedented reallocation of resources. It did not condemn all the Templars, but it sealed the disappearance of their order. The properties were transferred to the Hospitallers, except in Castile and Aragon, which retained certain fiefs. The brothers dispersed. Some led a monastic life, others joined the hospital, yet others chose isolation. The economic consequences were immediate. Agricultural and feudal properties changed hands, provoking resistance, adjustments, and conflicts. The county of Toulouse, granted 50,000 livres tournois, exemplifies these shifts in power. The new authorities had to manage this complex legacy between spiritual prerogatives and political stakes. This heritage contrasts with the initial rise of the temple. Their memory is now inscribed in the history of a changing Christendom, where ecclesial decisions reshape individual and collective trajectories. In sum, between 1312 and 1330, the dissolution and redistribution of the temple's assets durably reconfigured medieval Europe, testifying to the power dynamics between the papacy, monarchies, and surviving military orders.